All right. Hi, everybody. This may be, well, I think this will probably be the second to last video I will do for you all this summer session. I don't know if it's just me. I mean, it probably is, but I felt a bit disconnected with the async thing this semester in particular. Although I think part of the issue is working with this new book, which I'm not sure I'm going to be using again. I think it's fine, but I don't know. Anyway, let's take a look at what we've got going on this last week. I can't believe it. We're basically done. We have a forum post that is going to be due on Friday, the 24th of June. And then grades are due on Monday, the 27th. And so I'm giving you as much time as I possibly can to complete the final assignment number 10. But I basically can't let you have until 5 p.m. Because I've got to have that afternoon and any time that I need Monday to finalize all grades. So your final assignment number 10, and you've only got one this final week, is due on Sunday, the 26th by noon. And our last day of class, quote unquote, I mean, we're async, so it doesn't really have any kind of like particular meaning, I don't think, but the final day officially is Wednesday. But that, yeah, it really doesn't mean anything. I mean, if you've got any questions, any issues, if you bring them up in the chat, or if you want to email me, if you need a Zoom session with me just to kind of make sure everything's on track. I mean, I'm here all week and weekend, so happy to help. Wednesday doesn't mean anything. Okay, so let's take a look at forum number 6. The prompt is, after reading Leith's chapter on epideictic rhetoric, which is the last chapter basically, I'd like you to write a forum post about any examples of epideictic rhetoric in and around the quotidian of your life today. Okay, so quotidian, the everyday, just think about your everyday life, the media that you consume, the events that you participate in or that you are, that you go to, advertising culture, marketing culture, malls, um, you know, I mean, events that you go to related to family and friends, anything and everything that you might consider a part of your everyday life. Think of examples of epideictic rhetoric in them. So looking at Leith's chapter on epideictic rhetoric, I think some of the most important stuff for you related to that question really comes out of the first 2 or 3 pages. First of all, epideictic, or what's sometimes called display rhetoric, is one of the 3 types, one of the 3 branches of oratory. There's the deliberative, which I think every one of you is basically working through, with your arguments. And that focuses, for the most part, basically on the future tense. There's the forensic, also known as the judicial, which focuses on the past tense. And then there's the epideictic, which focuses on the present tense, the moment that you are living in the here and now, which can sound a bit counterintuitive considering that one of the best known types of epideictic rhetoric is a funeral oration. So if you think about funeral orations, if you have given one, or a family member or friend has given one, if you have been to a funeral and experienced a particularly compelling funeral oration, although the subject is obviously about somebody who has passed, I think one of the basic strategies behind a compelling oratory for a funeral, oration for a funeral, is to put mourners into a particular relationship with and in a particular mood in order to memorialize somebody in a certain way in order to really feel the ability to mourn for that person collectively in that moment. So the funeral oration, although about a subject in the past, is absolutely devoted to the moment in which the audience is present. On a completely on a far more mundane kind of silly end of the continuum from the funeral oration would be, for example, the celebrity roasts. Those are certainly examples of epideictic rhetoric, and I'm sure you've seen some of those on TV. Um, Also, like the speeches that are given at weddings, those are certainly epideictic. They're all about praising the new couple, praising the family, praising the moment. Um, if you just step back and think about moments of formality in which speech is a key vehicle for not just communicating ideas, but connecting people together, um, you may find that a good number of those have an epideictic dimension to them or are just epideictic, from beginning to end. Something I alluded to, and so getting back here to the chapter, Leith basically explains that epideictic is, basically about praise and blame. And yeah, that's true, but and that's really kind of the standard line about epideictic, but it's so much more than that. Um, it's not just about heaping praise on people or going after people. I mean, we certainly see that in politics. I think a lot of the rhetoric associated with Donald Trump, frankly, is epideictic with a lot of blame connected to it and praise. But I think that President Trump, if there's anything that stands out about his oratory, when you think about these big public events that he's giving, the rallies that he gives, is basically epideictic from beginning to end, um, or it seems like it to me. And that's an interesting thing to think about in terms of politics today, that you would have an audience who would be drawn to a politician not because they're making a deliberative argument, but because the focus is on epideictic, on putting people, for example, in a particular mood or reinforcing a mood that they want to be in, or that they didn't realize they wanted to be in, or that they're already in, but it gets supercharged by the speaker. And that's not just happening on the right, that's certainly happening on the left too. It's just happening all around. I think that speaks in part to a culture of postmodernism that we're living in, that we've been living in for decades now. So one of the things that you see with postmodern culture, among other things, and I realize here I'm kind of digressing a little bit and thinking about a video I gave, part of a video that I did last week for you all. Part of what you see with postmodern culture is a breakdown, a breakaway from a kind of universal and shared sense of reality, toward a more relative experience of facts and truth and knowledge. And we're certainly seeing that in politics, but also in social media, just the way that truth seems to have kind of become fluid. It has a lot to do with living in an information age, the way that knowledge has been kind of redistributed and made to feel more democratic and mutable via social network media. But it also just has to do with the postmodernization of culture. So I think that as reality becomes less of a kind of consensual experience for everyone, when it becomes more kind of relative and moldable by marketing, by politics, by various media, then I think you see epideictic kind of rise up in a way that it didn't in the ancient tradition for sure. So epideictic is really interesting. Yeah, sure, it's about praise and blame, you know, but it's also about putting people in a particular mood So it doesn't just have to be about speech, you know. It may seem like a leap here, but frankly, an architectural space, um, a built environment, think of Disneyland, think of, a Guggenheim style museum, think of architectural spaces, huge cathedrals for that matter, which weren't designed clearly in an era of postmodern built environments, but seem to have kind of become part of that today as they connect up with tourism. These kinds of huge edifices, the entertainment complexes, they have become spaces that define a particular experience of reality or even define reality in some way. And so I think Disney World, Disneyland are good examples of that. Um, so Epideictic, I think, is far more than about praise and blame today. It's really about lifestyle. A brand in many ways is epideictic in the ways in which it appeals to you. We connect to fashion, to the cars that we want to drive, to the restaurants and food that we want to consume as part of an overall lifestyle and branding. And that largely is epideictic. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that a lot of commercials these days, they don't even tell you at the end of a commercial that you need to drink this thing or wear this thing or eat this thing or whatever they're selling. They just create an epideictic message. It's just about kind of putting you into a vibe with a particular brand. Like in other words, it really isn't much of a hard sell anymore in advertising. It's interesting. And that's part of this kind of shift, I think, toward a culture in which epideictic has risen up to become just as important, if not in some ways more important than the traditional focus on the, um, forensic and deliberative rhetoric. Anyway, getting back to, so when you're thinking about form number 6, by all means, focus on the usual suspects. If you know that movie or that reference, mention, um, uh, you know, mention traditional examples of epideictic speech making, but you can certainly step back a little bit and think about your everyday life in terms of the ways in which different brands or different built environments are designed really to put you into a particular kind of experience, to put you into a particular kind of style of living, lifestyle. And in a video that I did last week related to the postmodern angle, I talked about this book by Pine and Gilmore called The Experience Economy. And their argument is that cutting edge profit these days, they wrote this book 20 years ago, but I think it still has some validity, if not a lot of validity, 2 decades later. Their argument was that companies really aren't making a lot of money off of services and goods. The price point for profit just really isn't there anymore. So how does a company make profit? How do they do that? And the cutting edge strategy was to exponentialize services and goods starting 20 years ago. One example that stands out from a decade ago is the MasterCard commercials. I think the campaign was called Priceless, and MasterCard would have like a commercial in which, well, it's appropriate for Father's Day. A father and son are at a baseball game, and the commercial is like, it costs this much for the tickets, it costs this much for the hot dog and drinks, catching the foul ball, that's priceless. And so the idea is that MasterCard is going to get you to that experience. And so they've exponentialized debt, they've exponentialized credit cards in order to make them more profitable as a branded product. But if you look at restaurants, franchise restaurants especially, look at all different kinds of entertainment related events that you go to and spaces that you enter. They're all kind of focused on the ways in which they've exponentialized the services and goods that are there in order to get that profit margin up a little bit more. And that's epideictic, largely. I mean, it's not praise and blame, but it is certainly epideictic. So I know I'm hopefully not just rambling here. I think I'm actually giving a fairly coherent mini lecture, but hope so, maybe. But the point here is to say, yeah, epideictic may have historically been, one critic even called it, historically kind of the waste bin in which we put speeches that didn't fit the forensic or the deliberative model. It's like if it wasn't forensic, if it wasn't forensic or deliberative, then what is it? We'll just call it epideictic. I don't think that really plays anymore. I think epideictic has really elbowed its way into a front and center position in postmodern culture, in a culture focused on the buying and selling of experiences or experientialized lifestyles, brands, etc. I think epideictic is really key. So yeah, maybe try to look past the usual suspects in your forum posts, but whatever you do is great. All right. So y'all really aren't doing much, or I should say, coming from New York, you guys are not really doing too much with epideictic in your arguments. But I'm glad that you read this chapter because as I said, epideictic is just so key to an understanding of the culture, kind of the popular culture in which we're living today, which is increasingly global at this point. All right, so the final assignment, number 10, this is the peroration for your written argument. And Leith makes it clear on page 83 that the peroration is really where you just hang it all out. This is the sixth and final section of your speech. You have, introduced yourself and your role in even being a part of the argument, i.e. the exordium. You have offered a basic description of your stance and the issue that's involved, i.e. the narration. You've explained how you and some of the opposing voices are kind of playing themselves out in the division. And then you've given a strong argument in favor of your position in the proof, and then really critiqued, but I would say with understanding and care, as opposed to with vitriol and just nastiness, the opposing views in the refutation. And then finally in the peroration, you just tie it all up in a bow, reiterate your argument, restate it, but do it with pathos and do it in a way that's going to really get your audience to feel invested in how invested you are in the position that you've chosen, reminding them why your position is really the better one or the best one of those that are out there. Use grand metaphors, really kind of, there's a focus in the chapter on the second part of rhetoric on the use of style, which we really haven't had a chance to talk about in this async summer session. So I'll just say that this is an opportunity related to style to kind of wax poetically, within the kind of decorum that your audience would expect. But yeah, the peroration is really, look, you've done all the hard work of kind of setting things up, outlining everything, putting it there for your audience to digest. Now you just bring it all together and just, make it pop, I guess, to use another descriptor there. So that's the peroration. And again, obviously, this is not an academic argument. I don't think any of you are writing for an academic audience. So just think about your audience and think about the range of emotion that they would find acceptable. If you have an audience that is just not going to want like overly effuse, like over the top metaphor and like, because that's just not who they are, then clearly you don't want to do that, right to your audience's level of engagement for sure. So I think that's it. I'd be happy to do another video if I see a few questions come across in the chat that would be best done as a video. Um, but I'll also happily just, write lots and lots of words in chat. I hope that's okay. Um, as we go along this week, as questions come in, or as I kind of see opportunity to help you all do a little bit better with some of the responses I see getting uploaded. So if I don't do another video, then I just want to say thank you for um, being a part of this summer session. I wish you all the best after the summer session is over. If you're going on vacation or if you're getting back to work or whatever you're doing, I wish you all the best, all the luck with it. And obviously, wish you all the best getting these final assignments done. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be around.